How's it going, guys? Never stop the RC. This is a Dynam BF-110 from BitGo Hobby. I've shown it once on the channel. We did a trim flight and then we did one more flight after that. It's a great flying airplane. It looks awesome in the air, easy to fly, a little tricky to take off. You don't have counter-rotating props and the rudders are fairly sensitive, so I'm still working on getting it to track straight on a takeoff. But once I had it trimmed, flying it, very easy. It's a very gentle airplane, slows down really well. It's actually a lot of fun to put the gear down, flaps down, fly it low, slow, and dirty. Doesn't need any elevator mixing with those flaps. Top end speed is not huge, but it's scale-like, and it lands very easily. Just a nice flying model, and it's a little different, and it looks really, like I said, it looks really good in the air. But it is a Dynam. If you've built a Dynam before, you already know this. If you have a Dynam plane, say, and you bring it to the field, and somebody who knows them asks you, what model is that? And you say it's a Dynam, they might look at you and ask, was the build okay? Are you all right? Because we pretty much all know that the fit and finish of Dynam planes is not quite the same level as some other brands. Usually when you put one of these together, you're going to run into a few hiccups along the way. The instructions are not very long, there's not a lot of steps, but usually lurking in there are going to be a couple areas which are going to take a lot longer than you anticipated because things aren't going to go as planned, not quite as planned. First thing when you take one of these planes out of the box, first tip for you guys as we go over the build, I'm just going to go over it step by step. And give you what I encountered as I put this thing together. First thing you want to do though is go over the whole model, make sure everything is secure and connected, make sure your control surfaces are attached properly, nothing's loose, control horns are in place, nothing's loose, servos, you know, your motor mounts, your motors, everything is solid. Mikey Firefox, you've seen him on the channel, he has the ME-109. When he took his out of the box, the rudder was detached, just completely off. So he had to rehinge that. So that's an issue right off the bat. It's pretty obvious that you had to deal with. Sometimes it's not obvious. Sometimes, you know, it could just be a little loose. So you want to check it and just make sure that it looks good. It's not hard to rehinge something if you need to do it. If you've never done it before, go on RC groups, look it up. It's very simple. But these are the kind of things you're going to encounter. So let's get to it. I'm going to go over the build, like I said, step by step, and the few issues that I encountered, and we'll get right to it. All right, I just want to show you guys the instructions. You start right there, go over there, down there, that's it. It's not very long, but like I said, it's going to take longer than you think. First step is not functional, so you could actually do it at the end if you wanted to. It's just for detail. That's gluing in the gun, the gunner, the pilot, the canopy, and those front guns. And they give you this generic glue in a white tube. And actually give you two of them, but you really shouldn't need the second tube. There's plenty of glue in the first just to get all this done. It's the only gluing you're going to do in the whole assembly. The only thing I'm going to mention is the second tip, and that's to test fit things first. Put all this stuff in place first to make sure it fits. Because for me, this gunner, if I had just glued him in, the canopy wouldn't fit over him. It would be like around here, and then I'd have to do some modifications to get it to work. So I didn't have to cut any foam or anything, but I did have to smash him down into the seat to make sure I had enough room to get the canopy over. So test fit things before you glue them, and you can avoid any issues that way. Now you might want to do this step last because the ESCs for the airplane are actually buried in the fuselage there. They get no cooling, there's no openings in the front, no airflow. And I know some people are cutting windows out and cutting holes into the foam so they get some airflow. You don't have to do that. Most planes like this, I'd put the ESCs in the nacelle so they get cooling that way. But this is Dynam. They're just sandwiched in the fuselage there together. Not ideal for them, but you know, two flights, I have no issues with it. You probably won't have any issues with it, but if you do want them to get cooling, just keep that in mind. The next step is assembling the tail, and this is where I did run into some issues. First part is just putting the tail wheel on, little set screw, no problem there. And then what they want you to do is attach the vertical stabilizers, there's a couple screws right there, onto the horizontal stabilizer. And this is before you put the horizontal stabilizer onto the fuselage. You don't want to put both rudders on, or both vertical stabilizers on, because you have to connect the elevator to the push rod, which is in the fuselage, and to do that you have to rotate that horizontal stabilizer about 90 degrees parallel to the fuselage and then twist it back around to get it into place. A lot easier to do that when you don't have these vertical stabilizers on. Ask me how I know. You can put those vertical stabilizers on after you put on the horizontal stabilizer. That's much easier. Anyway, that's not a big deal at all, really. The bigger deal is what's going on right in there, in that center piece, where the rudder push rods link together. So let me open that up and show you what's going on with that. In there you can see is a Dubro EZ Connector with the rudder push rods going through it. That is not the stock EZ Connector. Let me show you the stock EZ Connector. This is the stock EZ Connector. There is no way I was getting both of those rudder push rods through that tiny little hole. And I tried for about 10 minutes and then I just figured there's got to be a better way. My tip for you is if something is not working with a piece of hardware, consider a different piece of hardware. In that case, it was just going into my big bin of old Dubro pieces and bits and finding an EZ Connector that would work. The arm right here for the rudder swings out and pops up. So it's actually very easy to replace that EZ Connector. Before I talk about the assembling the wing, because that was fun, I just wanted to mention that during the maiden flight, if you saw the video, there was some trouble with getting the landing gear retracted. And I think that's because when I was bringing the plane over to the field, somehow this piece had popped outside of the door, so it wasn't closing all the way. So once I just popped it back into place, everything worked fine. So I have no issues with the landing gear or the retracts. Let's talk about getting this wing on because, you know, that was an adventure. You have this bar you put in place, slide the wings together. The issue is you have a whole mess of wire to get into that tiny fuselage. You have the aileron leads, flaps, gear, lights, ESC wires and leads, a whole bunch of Y connectors. All that spaghetti has to get stuffed into this narrow fuselage. And, you know, I spent a bunch of time doing that. In retrospect, I would just use some small zip ties, get it more organized and put it in. If I have to go back in there to rebind the receiver, I'm going to use the zip ties and get it more organized. Otherwise, I will tell you, you will have an adventure getting those wires in place. One little wire gets out of place and the wing's not going to fit. So it's kind of interesting, but I would recommend using those zip ties. The other thing is you have the 4 wing bolts. Of course, 3 of them go on perfectly, and the last one with the QC pass on it, I could not get this one in. If you're spending 10 minutes trying to screw it in place, it's not going to go. What you want to do then is get a little rod like this, even thinner, without the screw in there, you know. Feel around, find out where that fuselage anchor is. It's going to tell you which direction you need to go. In this case, it was this way, more towards the center line. So I had to, you know, get on the floor, put one knee on this side, push this wing towards the center line, and then screw that in, and then it went. You know, you can just mess around all day trying to get it, but it helps to know exactly where the alignment problem is. And that's something with these airplanes. Things don't line up perfectly every time, and you might have to make a little effort to get things into place. Before I wrap it up, I just want to mention real quick, of course, normally you would put the props on last, after everything else has been set up, your servos have been set up, reversed as needed, whatever. Then you put the props on because you don't want to have an accident inside. Make sure you use a throttle cut on your transmitter if you can do that, because the last thing you want is a model getting loose. Now, you do have to make sure that the motors are spinning in the proper direction before you put the wing on. If you don't have them set in the right direction, you're going to have to take the wing off and reverse an ESC wire. So you want to make sure you can either eyeball it, you can put a piece of tape on the motor shaft to make sure it's spinning in the right direction. You do want to make sure somehow that your props are going in the right direction before you get that wing fully in place. Well, there are a few things I encountered building this Dynam BF-110 and a few tips that hopefully can help you guys get one assembled if you're looking into it. And these also apply to other Dynam models as well. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe. And as always, never stop the RC. I'll see you next time.